I never thought that, 58 years after I was born, I'd discover I'd never really existed in my own family. This story starts with 47 photos, 47 proofs that I was nothing more than a stranger in the house I'd called home my whole life. 47 frozen moments of happiness I'd never been allowed to touch. But before I tell you about those photos, let me take you back to that unforgettable third night, the night I finally saw the truth. And it hit me hard. At 11 p.m., after a long, exhausting day at the office, I was curled up on the old couch in my silent apartment. Outside the window, the city was alive with lights and sirens. But in this room, there was only the ticking of a wall clock and the steady breathing of a woman who felt lonelier than ever. I opened my phone, a nightly habit I always hoped would bring a little connection to the outside world, and saw a notification from my sister Patricia. New photo album, it said, and the line that froze my heart. Family vacation in Hawaii, unforgettable memories. Right then, I knew this was just the start of something that would change everything. With fingers that were a little shaky, Linda tapped the first album. The images hit her like a lightning bolt. 47 bright, tropical photos, all full of laughter and joy. Mom Barbara with her silver hair neatly braided, grinning beside Dad Robert. Patricia and her husband David holding each other on the beach at sunset. My 3 nieces and nephews playing in the white sand. Even the 2-year-old grandson was there, being doted on by his grandparents. As Linda skimmed each picture, a cold feeling spread through her body. She wasn't in a single one. Not one shadow, not one trace, like she'd never existed in this family. When she realized that brutal truth, Linda's heart stopped. She set the phone down with trembling hands and tried to hold back the wave of dizziness. How could they have a family trip and not mention her? How could Patricia post these photos without a second thought about how her sister might feel? Memories from the past flooded back like a tide. Linda remembered her 16th birthday, when the family gave her a simple wristwatch while Patricia got a big party with 30 guests. She remembered Patricia's wedding, where she was pushed into the bridesmaid role and stood alone in a pink dress that didn't suit her skin tone. She remembered Christmas nights when the whole family gathered, but she always felt like a guest in her own childhood home. In that moment, Linda faced a painful truth she'd been denying for 58 years. She'd never been seen as an important member of this family. She was always the last to know. She was invited reluctantly. Her absence never left anyone missing. She couldn't hold back. Linda grabbed the phone and dialed Patricia. The clock read 11:30, but she didn't care about calling late. The line rang 3 times before Patricia answered, sleepy and a little annoyed. Hearing her sister's voice, Linda tried to stay calm. I just saw your Hawaii album. When did the family plan this trip? On the other end, Patricia was quiet for a long moment before answering defensively. Oh, that trip. It was kind of last minute. Mom didn't think you'd be into that kind of vacation. That answer lit a fire inside Linda. She took a deep breath before saying, You didn't even ask me. Patricia's tone went colder. You're always busy with work. We figured you wouldn't have time. Hearing that weak excuse, Linda felt the harsh truth sink in. They didn't ask because they didn't want her there. Plain and cruel. She swallowed and tried to hold the boiling feelings inside before saying, I get it. Good night. Before Patricia could reply, Linda hung up. She sat motionless in the dark living room, the phone's blue glow on her pale face. In that moment, Linda saw a future where she stopped waiting for attention from people who never really wanted her around. A future where she made her own happy memories instead of sitting at home waiting for an invite that never came. Her chest felt empty and strangely light. She realized she'd spent too many years trying to wedge herself into a family that had no room for her. Maybe it was time to stop trying to be loved by them and start learning to love herself. Linda sank into a sorrow she couldn't name, but at the same time she felt a faint spark of hope. For the first time in her life, she started thinking about making her own happiness, instead of waiting for someone else to hand it to her. And right then, something shifted deep inside, like spring quietly waking up after a long, cold winter. Sitting in the dark living room, phone still warm in my hand, I started replaying my life like a rewind. The Hawaii photos weren't the first. They were just the last drop that made an already full glass overflow. The first memory back was my 8th birthday. Patricia got a huge party with 20 kids, a princess cake, and a pile of presents. My birthday was just a family dinner and a store-bought cake. When I asked Mom Barbara why mine wasn't like Patricia's, She smoothed my hair and said, "Sweetie, your sister's younger. You've got to understand." Hearing that line again made my throat tighten. Back then, I believed I had to give way because Patricia was younger. But the next year and the year after, Patricia still got the big party. Me? Still a simple family dinner. I remember my 16th birthday, a big deal for any American girl. Patricia was 13 and promised a huge party when she turned that age. Me? Dad Robert gave me a stainless steel watch from the department store, with a forced smile and, "You're grown now. You need to learn to value time." Eating the homemade cake at home, no friends, no decorations, nothing special. I overheard my parents planning Patricia's next birthday. Mom said excitedly to Dad, "We'll rent a restaurant, invite her whole class. Patricia deserves a special day." In that moment, I felt crushed. The difference in how they treated us stopped being, "She's younger," and started feeling like something deeper, something cruel. The next memory was my high school graduation. I won a full scholarship to college for my grades. At the ceremony, when I walked up as valedictorian, only Mom Barbara was in the audience, clapping. Dad couldn't make it because he had to work. And Patricia was out with friends. After we got home, Mom said plainly, "I'm proud of you. Now we need to get ready for Patricia's summer trip." Hearing that, my heart stopped. The most important day of my studies was just a checkbox before planning my sister's vacation. When I was 22, Patricia got married. I was made a bridesmaid not because Patricia wanted me by her side, but because it was family tradition. During the whole wedding prep, no one asked my opinion. Dress color, hair, and even the photo locations were decided without me. On the wedding day, standing next to Patricia in a pale pink dress that didn't suit my skin, I heard Aunt Helen whisper to Aunt Margaret, "Linda looks so sad." "Maybe she hasn't found a husband," Margaret replied. "She's too focused on her career. Men don't like women who are too independent." At that moment, I felt utterly alone. Even on my sister's big day, I was the topic of pity and gossip. Years later, when Patricia had her first child, I became Aunt Linda, the one who bought expensive gifts, who'd babysit when needed, but never someone truly important in their lives. The kids got closer to other aunts women with their own families and kids to bond with. Then, at 35, I bought my first house with my own savings. I called the family, expecting congratulations. Mom's reaction surprised me. "Oh, that's great, sweetie. But I'm worried about Patricia. She and David need help to buy a house." Soon after, I was asked to lend Patricia and David a large interest-free loan so they could buy their dream home. When I hesitated, Dad said, "Family helps each other. You've got a steady income. Your sister needs support." That's when I realized I only mattered when they needed something from me. My steady income, my independence, my career, they only mattered if they could use them. Family dinners were scheduled around Patricia. Vacations were planned for her and the kids. Important talks about the family's future, money, or inheritance, I was never invited. As Mom and Dad aged, Patricia was treated as the one who'd make the big decisions about their care, even though I had more experience and was more stable. The reason? Patricia has a family. She understands responsibility. Sitting in the dark room, I saw the pattern that had lasted 58 years. I was always the second choice, the backup plan, the one remembered when useful but never prioritized. On paper, I was family, but in practice, I was just an acquaintance with the same last name. In that moment, I felt a harsh truth I'd denied for years. My family didn't love me less than Patricia, they just didn't see me as a real part of their lives. I fell into a sadness I couldn't name, but I also felt a strange relief. Finally, I'd looked the truth in the face instead of lying to myself. That December, Christmas was everywhere, sparkling lights, holiday songs drifting through the air. But for me, everything felt different. After seeing those Hawaii photos, I started noticing the details I used to ignore or excuse. On December 15, while wrapping gifts for the kids like I always did, I waited for Mom Barbara's usual call about Christmas plans. Normally, she'd ring around this time to go over the menu, who's bringing what, and the schedule. But this year, by December 20, no call had come. That afternoon, sitting in my office clearing out year-end work, my phone rang. Patricia's name flashed on the screen. I grabbed it quickly, thinking maybe the family had finally remembered me. But as soon as she started talking, I realized she hadn't meant to call. Her voice sounded far away, like the phone was on speaker. I heard her talking to someone, probably David. Mom said we should head out early so we can set everything up before everyone else gets there. A chill ran down my spine. I stayed silent, listening to a conversation I wasn't supposed to hear. David asked gently, "What about Linda? Does she know about the trip?" The sound of my name made my heart pound. Patricia's reply felt like a punch to the stomach. "Don't worry about Linda. Mom said not to mention it. Aspen's not her thing anyway." Aspen? They were planning Aspen for Christmas? Without me? David pushed back. "But it's Christmas. Family should be together." Patricia cut him off, annoyed. "David, you don't get Linda like I do. She'd just make everything tense. She's always so serious and gloomy. We just want a fun vacation." A cold wave washed over me. I hung up right there and sat frozen in my office chair, feeling like the world had caved in. That night, desperate for answers, I called my cousin Margaret, the one who always knew family news. Trying to sound casual, I asked, "Hey, have you heard anything about the family's Christmas plans?" There was a pause before she asked, "Linda, are you sure you want to know?" My chest tightened. I took a breath. "Yes, I want the truth." Margaret sighed. "They've been planning Aspen for 2 months. They rented a big cabin for everyone. Uncle Robert, your mom, Patricia, David, the kids, everyone. That everyone without me made my head spin. I sat frozen like stone. Margaret added awkwardly, "I thought they'd tell you. I even asked your mom about you, but she said Linda has her own plans." After hanging up, I sat in my kitchen, feeling betrayed by the people I loved most. They hadn't just excluded me, they'd planned carefully to hide it. The next day, fueled by a resolve I'd never felt, I drove to Mom's house in the drizzle. Raindrops streaked the windshield like all the tears I'd held back over the years. When I rang the bell, Mom opened the door, surprised. "Linda? What are you doing here?" "I'm packing for the trip." Hearing "the trip" said so casually lit a fire inside me. I walked past her without waiting, looked her straight in the eye, and asked, "Were you ever going to tell me about Aspen?" Her face shifted from surprise to defensive. She stepped back, avoiding my eyes. "Where did you hear that?" I stayed calm. "That doesn't matter. The question is, why didn't I know about Christmas plans?" She sat down, fidgeting with a handkerchief. "Linda, I didn't think you'd enjoy that kind of vacation. Aspen's cold, and you don't like skiing." Her flimsy excuses made my heart race, my mind oddly blank. I sat across from her. "Did you even ask me? Or did you just decide for me?" Before she could answer, a car pulled up outside. Patricia stormed in, angry. "Mom, why's Linda's car here? Does she know?" I turned to her. "Yes, I know. I know about the trip you've been planning for 2 months without telling me." Patricia dropped her purse on the table with a thud. "You listened in on my call?" I shook my head. "No. You left it on speaker and forgot to hang up. But that doesn't matter. What matters is why the family hid this from me." Mom stood, trying to mediate. "Girls, please don't fight. We can talk this through calmly." But Patricia snapped, "Fine. You want the truth? The truth is you make everything complicated. You're always serious, always analyzing. We just want a fun vacation." Her words stung like a slap. I stared at her. "So my being there ruins the fun?" Without hesitation, Patricia said, "Yes. You don't fit in. You don't have your own family, so you don't get what we're sharing." That brutal honesty knocked me back a step. I turned to Mom. "Do you feel the same?" She was silent for a long moment before speaking softly. "Sweetie, I just want everyone happy. Maybe you should find your own traditions." And that was it. The final truth. I wasn't a burden because of circumstances. I was a burden because of who I was. My independence. My seriousness. Not having my own family, that's what made me the outsider. I stood, picked up my bag, and said with strange calm, "All right, I'll find my own traditions." As I walked to the door, Patricia called, "Where are you going?" I turned back, looked at the 2 women who'd defined my life, and said, "To find a real family." I didn't slam the door. I closed it gently, like ending a chapter. Sitting in my car in the rain, I sent Patricia a text. "Hope you have a wonderful Christmas." Then I deleted the family chat group from my phone. For the first time in my life, I felt free from the duty to love people who never truly wanted me around. That Christmas passed in a strange kind of silence I'd never known. For the first time in 58 years, I didn't have to stress about buying gifts for everyone, cooking something for the family dinner, or planning my schedule around someone else's plans. Instead, I sat in my quiet apartment, sipping hot coffee, doing something I'd never dared to do before planning for myself. On December 22, while my family was probably packing for Aspen, I opened my laptop and started searching solo travel for women. Just typing those words felt strange. My whole life, I'd never gone anywhere alone, not for fun, not even for work trips without colleagues. The first images on the screen stunned me. Confident women standing in front of breathtaking landscapes, alone but not lonely. They glowed with genuine smiles, eyes sparkling with joy. I wondered, could I ever be one of them? Hours later, one place had me hooked. Tuscany, Italy. Rolling vineyards, medieval villages, tree-lined roads leading to little towns where time seemed frozen. But it wasn't the beauty that drew me in. It was how people described the culture, a place where family really mattered, where strangers welcomed you with warmth. On a blog by a 56-year-old woman named Sarah, I read words that shook me. Tuscany taught me family isn't just blood. Family is the people who welcome you at their table, listen to your story, and make you feel like you belong. Right then, I knew I'd found my destination. Not because Tuscany was romantic or luxurious, but because maybe there, I'd finally learn what it means to belong. I spent the night researching Montalcino, a small Tuscan town famous for Brunello wine. Unlike the touristy spots, Montalcino promised a real taste of Italian life. Reviews said locals welcomed visitors like old friends, and dining alone didn't feel strange there. On December 26, the day after Christmas, I took the first real step. I picked a date. February, my birthday month. Instead of another lonely cake at home, I'd give myself the biggest gift ever: freedom. When I opened a booking site and saw the price, $4,800 for round-trip flights, 3 weeks of hotels, and living expenses, my heart raced. It was almost exactly the amount I'd been saving for family emergencies. I heard Mom Barbara's voice in my head. Money's for important things, not wasting on silly pleasures. Then, another voice, mine, cut in. Isn't my happiness important? I closed my eyes, took a breath, and clicked, choose flight. February 4, Valentine's Day. Instead of sitting home lonely again, I'd be flying to Italy to fall in love with life itself. At the payment screen, my hands shook. This wasn't just buying a trip. It was the first time I was putting myself first. I typed each number slowly, like it carried sacred meaning. When I hit confirm, the feeling that spread through me wasn't regret or panic. It was relief, like finally slipping out of a too-tight coat I'd been wearing for years. 5 minutes later, the email came. Congratulations, Linda Thompson. Your flight to Rome is confirmed. I read it again and again, hardly believing I'd really done it. The next day, Patricia called. After 3 rings, I picked up. Her voice sounded awkward. Did you get the Christmas gift from us? I looked at the box on my table, a generic department store scarf, no personal note. Yeah, thanks. She was quiet, then said, We just got back from Aspen. It was really fun. A familiar anger rose in me, but this time it faded quickly. That's great. So, any plans for New Year's? Patricia asked, clearly trying to keep the conversation going. For the first time in my life, I had something worth saying. Yeah, I'm going to Italy. 01. The silence on the other end stretched so long I thought she'd hung up. Finally, she blurted, You're kidding, right? No, I'm serious. 3 weeks in Tuscany, starting February 14. She gasped. But, alone? You can't go alone. I smiled for the first time in days. Why not? I've been living alone for decades. That's different. Traveling alone is dangerous. Mom will worry herself sick. This time, my voice was firm. Then tell Mom I'm grown and can take care of myself. Before she could argue, I added, I've got a lot to prep. Gotta go. After hanging up, I sat there realizing something had shifted. For once, I didn't feel the need to justify my choice. I said what I wanted and it felt right. The next days became a ritual of preparation. I renewed my passport, bought travel insurance, and downloaded an Italian app. Every night, I practiced phrases. Buongiorno. Good morning, grazie. Thank you. Dove posso trovare? Where can I find? Shopping for the trip felt like a rebirth. For the first time, I bought clothes not out of need or discounts, but because they made me feel good. A blue floral dress, stylish walking shoes, a wide-brimmed sun hat. Each item carried the hope of a new version of me. I also bought a leather journal with a world map cover. That night, before bed, I wrote the first line. I promise to open myself to everything this journey brings. I won't compare it to the past. I'll live each moment as a gift. On February 13, one day before my flight, I got a text from Mom. Linda, Patricia says you're going to Italy alone. That's not safe. Your father's not well. You should stay home. I read it, feeling the old chains tugging again. But this time, I had the strength to break them. I typed back, Mom, I need this trip. I'll call often. Please trust me. Then I turned off my phone and finished packing. Looking at my suitcase, I realized I wasn't just preparing for a trip. I was preparing to meet the woman I'd always been capable of becoming if only I had the courage. That night, for the first time in months, I slept deeply. I dreamed of walking down the tree-lined roads of Tuscany, not alone, but side by side with the best version of myself. February 14, 5 in the morning, I stood at my apartment window with my last cup of coffee at home, looking out at the city still wrapped in darkness. My suitcase waited by the door, and in my bag was the plane ticket, a small piece of paper that felt like a passport to a new life. When the taxi pulled up, my heart pounded the way it did when I was a kid heading to the first day of school. But this time, the nerves mixed with something new, pure excitement for an adventure I chose for myself. At the airport, the usual routines suddenly felt different. When the check-in agent asked, "Traveling alone?" I answered, "Yes," with a confident smile that even surprised me. With 90 minutes before boarding, I decided to do something I'd never dared before. Upgrade my seat with reward points. At the service counter, the agent, Michelle, smiled and said, "We can move you up to business class at a special rate. Is this trip something special?" Special? This was the most special trip of my life. "Yes," I said with a grin. "It's my birthday trip." She handed me my new boarding pass. "Have a wonderful flight and a very happy birthday." In the business lounge, I looked around at travelers, some on business, some with families, and for the first time, being alone didn't feel like a lack. It felt like a choice. On the plane, when the flight attendant offered champagne, I sipped it slowly, celebrating not just the trip but the bravest decision of my life. As the plane lifted off and the city shrank below, a strange, beautiful lightness spread through me. The 8-hour flight to Rome passed faster than I expected. I read about Tuscan history, listened to Italian classical music, even chatted with the woman next to me, Margaret, on her way to visit her daughter in Milan. When she asked about my trip, I said, "I'm going to find myself." She smiled knowingly. "That's the best journey there, Island." Landing in Rome at 9 a.m. Local time, I felt like a kid walking into a theme park for the first time. Everything was new. The sing-song sound of Italian echoing through the terminal, the rich smell of espresso from tiny cafes. At the info desk, a man named Antonio told me, in charmingly broken English, "You go Tuscany alone? Very brave. Have a wonderful trip." On the train from Rome to Florence, I watched the scenery roll by terracotta houses, green fields, endless olive-covered hills. With each mile, I felt like I was leaving pieces of my old self behind. In Florence, I switched trains for Montalcino. Wrestling with luggage in the busy station worried me, but when an elderly Italian couple noticed, they stepped in. The husband, Giuseppe, said in halting English, "You need help? We also go Montalcino." During the hour-long ride, he and his wife, Maria, told me about their hometown. Maria's warm eyes sparkled as she said, "Montalcino is perfect for people who want to feel the real Italy. You will love it." When the train pulled in, Giuseppe helped with my bags, pointing out the way to my hotel. As we said goodbye, Maria hugged me and whispered, "Welcome to the Montalcino family." Those words nearly brought me to tears. On my very first day, I felt more welcomed than I had in years with my own blood relatives. Hotel Il Giglio stood inside a 16th-century building wrapped in ivy. Francesca, the owner, greeted me with a radiant smile. "Signorina Linda, we've been waiting for you." Being called Signorina instead of ma'am made me feel younger. She led me upstairs and opened the shutters. This is our best view. You deserve it. The sight stole my breath, rolling green vineyards to the horizon, golden farmhouses, and tall cypress trees painted in the warm glow of late afternoon. On the balcony, sipping mineral water with a plate of local olives Francesca had brought, I felt truly relaxed for the first time in months. No buzzing phone, no one asking me for anything, no pressure to please. That evening, I wandered the tiny town, a few main streets lined with shops, restaurants, and old stone walls radiating charm. Passing a cozy bar, laughter, and the smell of fresh pasta drew me inside. The owner, a silver-haired man named Franco, greeted me warmly. Buonasera, signora. First time in Montalcino? When I nodded, he said, Then you must try our Brunello wine. It's the pride of our town. I sat alone by the window, sipping rich red wine and savoring handmade pasta. And I realized something. I didn't feel lonely. I felt free. Families and travelers laughed around me, but no one looked at me with pity for dining solo. Franco checked in often, sharing stories about the vineyard history with pride. As I left, he said, Signorina Linda, tomorrow you must visit my family's vineyard. I'll introduce you to my wife. Walking back under moonlight on cobblestone streets, it felt like stepping into a dream. My first day in Italy had already gone beyond anything I hoped for, opening doors I never thought possible. That night, I wrote in my journal, Today I learned that being alone and being lonely are two very different things. Being alone can be powerful. Free. I'm beginning to understand that. I fell asleep to the sound of crickets and the wind rustling vineyard leaves outside my window. For the first time in years, my dreams weren't haunted by regret, they were lit with promise. In that moment, I knew. Coming to Italy wasn't just a trip. It was the first step toward becoming the woman I was always meant to be. On my 5th morning in Montalcino, I signed up for a cooking class Francesca had recommended. La Cucina della Nonna Grandma's kitchen is held in an old house right in the town center. The wide kitchen with worn wooden tables and pots of herbs in the air felt like stepping into the heart of Italy. The first person I met was Elena Rossi, a lively 67-year-old with silver hair pulled back neatly and bright blue eyes. Seeing me hover at the door, she walked over and said in gentle, accented English, Hello, I'm Elena. First time in class? Her warmth calmed my nerves. Yes, I'm Linda. From the US, Elena smiled widely and took my hand. Wonderful! Today we make fresh pasta from scratch. You'll love it. For 3 hours, she guided me through kneading dough, rolling it out, and shaping ravioli. But more important than the cooking were the stories we shared. As we filled the ravioli, Elena told me, I've been a widow 10 years now. My 2 children live in Rome and Milan, too busy to visit often. I felt an instant kinship. I know how that feels. My family doesn't really need me either. Elena paused, looked into my eyes, and said, Linda, sometimes blood isn't our true family. Real family are the ones who love us for who we are, not for what we do for them. Her words lit a warmth in me I hadn't felt in years. Someone finally understood. After class, as we sat eating our pasta, Elena invited me to that evening's town festival. Every month we gather in the square for music. Nothing fancy, just neighbors together. That night, she picked me up and we walked to the square, where lanterns glowed and laughter mixed with the scent of wine. Elena introduced me to her friends as if I'd always belonged. This is Linda, my new friend from America. She makes pasta better than us already. They laughed, welcomed me, and no one asked why I was alone or where my family was. Instead, they asked if I liked the wine, if I'd tried the local pecorino cheese, and how I was enjoying life in Montalcino. Midway through, a man with graying brown hair joined us. Elena hugged him. Marco, you're here. This is Linda, the friend I told you about. Marco Benedetti shook my hand warmly. Welcome to Montalcino, Linda. Elena says you're traveling alone? Very brave. As we talked, I learned he was a local tour guide, divorced 2 years, with a 16-year-old son in Florence. What struck me wasn't his easy smile, but the way he truly listened. When I explained why I'd come to Italy, Marco nodded. Sometimes we have to go far to discover who we really are. I learned that after my divorce. He shared his story how his ex-wife's family never accepted him, treating him like an outsider for 15 years. When we split, I realized I'd wasted so much time trying to be what they wanted instead of who I was. I nodded, feeling a deep connection. I know that feeling never good enough, no matter how hard you try. He looked at me with kind brown eyes. Maybe the problem isn't us. Maybe we were just in the wrong place, with the wrong people. As the evening wound down, Marco offered to walk me back. On the way, he said, "Tomorrow I'm taking a small group to hidden vineyards tourists never see. Want to join? I'll show you the real Tuscany." The next day, I joined Marco, a Canadian couple, and an Australian solo traveler named Sarah. Everywhere we went, locals greeted Marco like family. At the Marchetti Vineyard, 80-year-old Nonna Teresa invited us in for lunch. Hearing I was learning Italian cooking, she pulled me into the kitchen to teach me osso buco. While we worked, she said in broken English, "Linda, your eyes? Sad. Not bad sad. Sad. Like searching." I told her about my family. She nodded knowingly. "Ah, family is hard. But in Italian we say famiglia del cuore, family of the heart. The people who choose to love us." No. That afternoon, sitting under a grape arbor with Elena, Marco, Sarah, and the Marchetti family, I felt something I'd never felt. Belonging. They hadn't known me before today, yet they welcomed me as one of their own. Sarah spoke about her solo travels after divorce. Elena said, "The strongest women are those brave enough to leave their comfort zone to find true happiness." Marco added, "And the bravest people are those willing to let go of the familiar to find where they truly belong." That night, when I called Patricia to check in, the conversation was unlike any we'd had before. "Are you lonely?" she asked. With steady confidence, I answered, "No. Honestly, I feel more connected than I ever have." She was quiet before saying softly, "You sound different, happier." After hanging up, I sat on the balcony, staring at the moonlit hills. For the first time, I understood family's true meaning. Not those who share your blood, but those who welcome you, listen to you, and cherish you as you are. Elena showed me that age doesn't block new friendships. Marco showed me how shared pain can lead to healing. And the people of Montalcino proved that kindness needs no reason. That night, I wrote in my journal, "Today I learned real family isn't where you're born, but where you're chosen and loved." I found mine here, among strangers who became friends. And in that moment, I realized maybe my family had done me a strange favor by rejecting me. They pushed me to go find the people truly worthy of the love I had to give. My second week in Montalcino brought changes I could feel every single day. Each morning, I woke with excitement instead of dread. My first habit wasn't checking my phone for family messages, but opening the window, breathing in the crisp air, and watching the hills wrapped in morning mist. Elena introduced me to a morning yoga class in a small park, led by a teacher named Julia. For the first time in my life, I joined a physical activity not out of obligation or guilt, but because I truly wanted to. During that first session, as Julia guided us through sun salutations, I felt like I was greeting a new version of myself. Stretching in the warm light didn't just loosen my body, it unlocked tight spaces in my soul. After a week of yoga, I noticed real changes. My shoulders no longer curved in as if ears trying to disappear. I stood tall, looking straight ahead with a confidence I'd never felt. The food changed me too. Gone were the rushed, bland meals back home. Here, every meal felt like a small celebration. I learned to savor each bite, each sip of wine, each unhurried moment without guilt. It even showed on my face. My skin looked brighter, my eyes sparkled more, and most of all, I smiled more. Not the forced smile I used to wear to please others, but a genuine one, born from joy inside. On day 12, I had a moment I'll never forget. I slipped into the old Chiesa di San Francesco, looking for quiet. Sunlight streamed through stained glass windows, painting the stone floor with colors like angels. Sitting on a wooden pew, something inside me broke open. Years of pain, rejection, disappointment came rushing out. I cried, not angry tears, not self-pity. Tears of release. I wept for the 8-year-old who never got the big birthday party. For the 16-year-old who felt unworthy. For the grown woman who spent decades begging love from people who couldn't give it. As tears fell, Elena walked in. She didn't speak, just sat beside me and laid her hand on my shoulder. Her presence was comfort enough. When I finally calmed, she whispered, "Tears are the soul's way of cleansing itself. Linda, you're washing away the past to make room for the future." From that day on, The weight I'd carried for years felt lighter. I began to see my past not with bitterness, but with understanding, even gratitude. My family did what they thought was right, even if it hurt me. And that pain had brought me here, to these people, to this new self. That week, I also dared to try new skills. Marco taught me photography not just to capture places, but emotions. Through the lens, I started seeing the world like an artist, not a bystander. I photographed old women chatting on benches, kids chasing butterflies in vineyards, and sunsets filtering through grape leaves. Each picture held not just Tuscany's beauty, but my new way of seeing life. Elena took me to wine tastings, where for once my opinion mattered. When sommelier Giuseppe asked what I thought of a 2015 Brunello, I said, "It feels like autumn in a glass, warm, rich, with a finish that lingers like good memories." He nodded with respect. "That's a poetic and accurate description. You have a gift." His praise mattered not because it came from him, but because it showed me I could trust my own voice. On day 16, when I called home, the call was different. I didn't start by apologizing or asking about everyone else. I shared my joy, my pride. When Patricia asked, "So when are you coming back?" I said calmly, "When I'm ready." She was quiet, then said, "You sound different, more confident." After hanging up, I realized I'd stopped chasing their approval. Not because I didn't love them, but because I'd learned to love and respect myself first. That night, at our usual bar with Marco and Elena, I shared Patricia's comment. Marco grinned. "Linda, you didn't become confident. You just stopped hiding the confidence that was already there." Elena nodded. "Sometimes we need to go far away to finally see who we really are." Writing in my journal later, I saw it clearly. Each day in Montalcino brought me a new discovery about myself. I had an artist's eye. I could make friends easily. Most of all, I had the strength to create my own happiness. The anxious, approval-seeking woman I used to be was giving way to someone new, a woman who knew what she wanted, who could speak her mind, and most importantly, who finally knew she deserved to be loved and respected. And in that moment, I understood. The road ahead wouldn't look like the dreams I once clung to. It would look better, because it would be fully mine. On my 18th day in Montalcino, I lived through a moment I'll never forget. Marco and I were walking through the Rossi family vineyard after dinner, the sunset painting the hills in blazing orange. The world was quiet except for the crunch of gravel under our feet and distant birdsong. Suddenly, Marco stopped. He turned to me with those warm brown eyes I'd grown to know so well. "Linda, I need to tell you something." The seriousness in his voice made my heart race. For 3 weeks, we'd become close friends, but I'd felt something deeper quietly growing between us. He drew a breath. "I know you're only here for a short time, but I can't hold this in anymore. I love you, Linda. I love how you see life, how you smile when you try new food, how you listen with your whole heart." His words hit me like a wave of warmth. I'd felt the pull too, but had been afraid to believe it. Looking into his eyes, seeing both honesty and the scars of his past, I whispered, "Marco, I feel the same, but I'm scared. I've never truly been loved." He gently took my hand. "Linda, what your family did to you doesn't define your worth. They just didn't know how to love you right." That night, under a sky full of stars on my hotel balcony, Marco told me about his unhappy marriage. "I spent 15 years trying to be who my ex-wife's family wanted. I forgot who I really was. Meeting you reminded me what it feels like to be accepted as myself." Hearing him, I realized we recognized each other not just through similar life experiences, but through the same wounds. We both knew what it was like to be outsiders in our own families. The next day, Marco surprised me with a question. "I know you plan to stay 1 more week, but have you thought about staying longer? Here in Italy?" My mind spun. Stay? In Italy? Could that even be real? He pressed on with hope in his voice. "I'm expanding my tour business. I want to focus on trips for women traveling solo. You understand them. You'd be amazing at this. We could work together." The idea thrilled and terrified me all at once. Part of me wanted to say yes immediately, but another part trembled at such a huge change. That night, over coffee with Elena, I told her about Marco's proposal. She listened quietly, then said, "Do you know why I stayed in Montalcino after my husband passed? Because this is where I feel most alive. Not because of the past, but because of the future it offers." Ask yourself, Linda, where do you feel most alive? Her words hit me straight in the heart. These past 3 weeks in Montalcino, I'd felt more alive than in 30 years back home. But just as I started to picture staying, my phone rang. Mom's name lit up the screen. My chest tightened. Her urgent voice, all too familiar. Linda, you need to come home right now. Your father fell and is in the hospital. We need you. My first reflex was automatic. I'll book a flight immediately. But Elena's steady eyes stopped me. Linda, how serious is it? Did she say? I pressed for details. Mom's answer was vague. The doctors are checking, but you're his daughter, you have responsibilities here. After the call, Elena suggested, why not phone the hospital directly? I did. The nurse told me Dad's fall was minor. He'd be discharged the next morning. Nothing at all like Mom had made it sound. Relief mixed with anger. Once again, my family had tried to drag me back with guilt. Marco, who had overheard, said gently, Linda, I'll support whatever choice you make. But please choose based on what you want, not guilt. That night, I barely slept, torn between two roads. One, the old life, safe, but suffocating. The other, a new life, risky, but full of possibility and love. The next morning, I called Patricia for clarity. She admitted, honestly, Dad's fine. Mom just really wants you home. She thinks your trip's gone on too long. Her blunt honesty cleared my head. Patricia, I said firmly, I will come back, but not for the reason Mom thinks. What do you mean? She asked. I took a deep breath. I'm coming back to close out my old life and prepare for a new one. I've decided to return to Italy. The silence stretched so long I thought she'd hung up. Finally, she said, shocked, You're moving to Italy? Yes, Patricia. For the first time in my life, I'm choosing my happiness. When I told Marco, he pulled me into his arms. Linda, you've shown me that real love can heal old wounds. Now let me prove that to you. Elena's face glowed when I shared the news. You've learned the most important lesson. Putting your happiness first isn't selfish. It's necessary. On my last morning in Montalcino before flying back to the US, I sat on the balcony with coffee, staring at the hills I now knew I'd call home. For the first time ever, I was making a life decision based on love, not fear. On desire, not duty. I knew the return to America wouldn't be easy. There would be hard talks, practical steps, maybe even pushback from family. But this time, I wouldn't face it alone. I had Marco. I had Elena. And most of all, I had myself, the stronger, truer version I'd found here. When the plane lifted off from Rome, Marco, by my side, he'd chosen to come meet my family and stand with me through the transition. I felt like I was flying back into my past, only so I could finally be free to fly into my future. For the first time, I wasn't afraid of what my family would say or think, because I had found real love for myself, and love from people who truly saw me. March 10, the plane touched down under the gray skies of late winter. As Marco and I stepped off the jet bridge, the cold air hit me a sharp contrast to the warm Tuscan sun we'd just left. But the real difference wasn't the weather. It was me. 3 weeks earlier, when I walked through this airport, my head was down, shoulders hunched, trying to take up as little space as possible. Now I stood tall, walked steady, hand clasped in Marco's, carrying a confidence I'd never known. Patricia and Mom were waiting. When they saw me with Marco, their surprise was written all over their faces. Patricia looked me up and down, like she was staring at a stranger. You look so different. Mom's eyes darted between me and Marco. Disapproval plain. Linda, who is this? Once, that sharp tone would have made me shrink and apologize. This time, I smiled calmly. Mom, this is Marco Benedetti. He's my boyfriend and my future business partner. At the word boyfriend, Mom's mouth tightened. Boyfriend? Linda, you're 58. You can't act like some young girl. A few weeks ago, that would have stung. Now, I only feel sorry for her. Mom, I said gently, love doesn't have an age limit. Marco, prepared for this, stepped forward politely. It's an honor to meet you both. Linda's told me so much about her family. On the drive, the tension was thick. Patricia kept sneaking glances at me in the rearview mirror. Mom sat silent and stiff. Marco squeezed my hand now and then, a steady reminder I wasn't alone. At the hospital, Dad was sitting up in bed, reading the paper. He looked perfectly fine. When he saw me, his face lit up. "Linda, you're home." He hugged me tightly, and in that embrace, I felt a rare kind of love I'd craved my whole life. When I introduced Marco, Dad shook his hand warmly. "Thank you for taking care of my daughter." The next evening, the family hosted a welcome home dinner, though it felt more like an interrogation. Around the familiar table, the house seemed smaller, darker, heavier than I remembered. Mom started in, her voice full of control. "Linda, we need to talk about your plans. You can't just abandon everything here to chase a fantasy." The word fantasy would have made me crumble before. Now, I kept my voice steady. "Mom, it's not a fantasy. It's a carefully thought-out plan for my future." "Oh," Patricia jumped in. "But have you thought about us? If you leave, who's going to help when the family needs something?" The guilt began to creep in, but I pushed it away. Looking her straight in the eyes, I said, "Patricia, for 58 years, I've been there whenever the family needed me. But when I needed you, where were you?" Her voice faltered. "You know, I cut in gently but firmly. "I'm not blaming anyone. But now, I need to live for me." Mom tried one last argument. "Linda, you're too old to start over. People will talk." For so long, that fear of what people would say had ruled me. Now it just sounded absurd. I smiled softly. "Mom, I've spent too many years worrying about what others think. Now I only care about how I feel." Marco, who'd been quiet, finally spoke. "I understand your worries. But in Italy, Linda is respected and admired. She's opened my eyes to new possibilities. She's extraordinary." Mom shot him a skeptical look. "You've known her 3 weeks. What could you possibly understand?" Marco's calm reply silenced the room. "Maybe only 3 weeks. But in that time, I've seen her shine in ways she never could here." For the first time all night, Dad spoke up. "Linda, can I talk to you privately?" In his study, he sat across from me, eyes soft. "Sweetheart, I see it. You're different, stronger, more confident. And I'm sorry. I should have protected you from the pressures of this family." "No." Tears stung my eyes. "Dad," he went on, "your mom and Patricia, they're difficult, yes. But it comes from fear. Fear of change. Fear of losing control. Not from malice." He stood and hugged me. "Do what makes you happy. I'm proud of you." That blessing felt like an unexpected gift. For the first time, I felt a family member truly on my side. The following days blurred with meetings, lawyers, banks, real estate. I decided to sell my house and invest the money into the business Marco and I were building in Italy. Each signature felt like another step toward freedom. One afternoon, Patricia came to me privately. For once, her voice was honest. "I'm sorry. I was jealous of you, Linda. And I didn't even realize it." "Jealous? Of what?" I asked. She sighed. "Of your independence. I have a family, but I feel trapped, always doing what's expected. You've always had a choice." Oh? That conversation shifted something. Patricia wasn't an enemy, she was another victim of the same family expectations. But Mom wasn't ready to let go. On my last day, she faked a heart attack, called an ambulance, and demanded I rush to the hospital. When I realized it was all a performance, real anger surged in me. For the first time, I stood firm. "Mom, I'll always love you. But I won't let you manipulate me anymore." Her eyes widened in shock. She'd never heard me say no. "I'll call. I'll visit. But I will live my own life." As I turned to leave, she called out, "If you go, don't expect forgiveness." I stopped, looked back one last time. "Mom, I don't need forgiveness for choosing happiness. I only need to forgive myself for waiting so long to do it." That night, standing in my empty room, boxes gone, furniture sold, Marco wrapped his arms around me. "Do you regret it?" he asked softly. I leaned into him. "No. For the first time, I know I'm heading the right way." "I do." The next morning at the airport, only Dad came. He hugged me tight and whispered, "My little girl has become such a strong woman. I'm so proud." As the plane lifted off, I watched my hometown shrink beneath me. I wasn't leaving in fear this time. I was leaving with love, hope, and trust in myself. The woman flying back to Italy wasn't the same one who'd left 3 weeks earlier. She was stronger, she was confident, and most importantly, she finally knew how to love and protect herself. 6 months after settling in Montalcino, I woke up the way I always do now, to birdsong and the warm golden light pouring through the window of the little hillside house Marco and I rent. The old 2-bedroom place has a balcony overlooking the vineyards, and out back, I've planted a small herb garden with cuttings Elena taught me to grow. Today felt different, though. It marked the success of Tuscany Solo Adventures, the tour company Marco and I launched for women traveling alone. Wanderlust magazine had just featured our story, and our tours were fully booked for the next 6 months. As I prepped for a new group arriving that afternoon, I realized this wasn't just a business. Every woman who came carried her own story of searching for herself, and I felt like I was passing along the same gift Montalcino had given me. Last week, a guest named Sarah, 62, newly divorced, joined us for a 5-day tour. She was shaky, apologizing for every little thing. I recognized my old self in her immediately. On day 1 at the Marchetti Vineyard, I showed her how to taste wine not just with her palate but with her spirit, sharing the story of when I first learned to trust my own judgment. By day 3, she was confidently voicing her opinion on a Chianti we sampled. On day 5, she looked radiant, telling me, "Linda, thank you for showing me I'm stronger than I thought." That's when it hit me my story had become a bridge, helping other women step into their own strength. What my family once labeled selfish, choosing my own happiness, had actually turned into service, the most meaningful kind. Even my family relationships had shifted. Dad and I video call weekly now. He tells me about his garden, and I tell him about Italy. Last month, he even said, "Sweetheart, I'm planning to visit you and Marco this fall." Patricia calls more often, too, not to complain or ask for help, but to truly check in. Just last week, she admitted, "I've been thinking about therapy. You've shown me change is possible. Even with Mom, though complicated, there's been progress." She's stopped trying to manipulate me back home, and sometimes even asks about Marco with less hostility in her tone. Tonight, Marco and I are hosting our engagement party at Elena's vineyard. We'll marry in the fall, when Dad can travel. Planning this wedding feels nothing like what I once imagined. No pressure to please the family, no rigid traditions. Instead, we're creating our own. We'll exchange rings under the ancient vine where Marco first told me he loved me. Elena will be our witness. The feast will be a potluck, with friends from the community bringing their favorite dishes. This morning, as I watered herbs in the garden, Elena passed by with a basket of tomatoes. She stopped, smiled, and said, "Linda, do you know what makes this old lady happiest?" I paused. "What?" "To see you become the woman you were born to be. You didn't just find love with Marco. You found love with yourself." Her words made me stop and reflect. I thought about the woman who boarded a plane 6 months ago, scared, doubtful, desperate for acceptance. And the woman I am now, waking up each morning excited, making choices based on my own intuition and values, loving and being loved in a healthy, mutual way. Most of all, existing without asking anyone's permission. That afternoon, as I welcomed a new group, 5 women from the UK, Australia, and Canada, I saw pieces of my old self in their eyes. One had just divorced, one had just retired and felt lost, and one had never traveled alone. At the town square, I told them, "Welcome to Tuscany. This week isn't just about vineyards and villages, it's about discovering parts of yourself you may not know are there." Margaret from Canada asked, "Can you share your first trip here?" I looked around the same square where I once felt lost and afraid, now my home, and said, "I came running from a family that never valued me. But I discovered I wasn't running away. I was running toward myself." That night, under lanterns and moonlight at our engagement party, I looked around and saw my real family. Elena laughing with Marco. Nonna Teresa teaching new guests to make pasta. Giuseppe was strumming his guitar and singing old folk songs. When Marco slid the ring onto my finger under the ancient vine, he said, "Linda, you taught me love isn't about finding a missing half. It's about being cherished for the whole person you've become." Oh, later, after everyone left, I stood alone under the starry sky, filled with a peace I'd never known was possible. I thought of the women I'd meet next week, the stories they'd bring, the discoveries they'd make. I thought of Dad planning his first ever trip abroad and Patricia finding the courage to change her own life. And I realized the greatest journey of my life wasn't the miles I flew from America to Italy. Not the sights I saw or the people I met. It was the path from a woman desperate for approval to a woman who knows she's enough, strong enough, worthy enough, lovable exactly as she island. If you hear yourself in my story, remember this. Sometimes being left out is the beginning of finding who you really are. Sometimes the longest journey is the one back to yourself. And if you're brave enough to step onto that plane, literal or not, you may be surprised at the person waiting for you at the destination.